Before we begin, a quick note about this episode. The audio quality for this show isn't up to the usual standards. I had a little kerfuffle when I was recording the episode, so the audio quality starts off really good, but then soon after, it kind of dips a little bit. I was actually debating whether or not I should release this episode, but the audio quality is not that bad, and I'm really enthusiastic about the movie that we're going to cover. So enjoy it as best you can. If the audio quality is so bad that you find it unlistenable, then I'm not mad at you if you skip it. But rest assured, it's not representative of all of the shows that I have already recorded or all of the shows that I will record in the future. Just want to give you a heads up, because when you listen to it, it's going to kind of throw you for a loop. Enjoy the show.
Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
Now, children, come over here. I'm going to tell you a bedtime story. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Once upon a time, there lived a magnificent race of animals. They dominated the world through age after age. They ran and they swam and they fought and they flew. Until suddenly, quite recently, they disappeared. Nature just gave up and started again. We weren't even apes then. We were just these smart little rodents hiding in the rocks. And when we go, nature will start again. With the bees, probably. Nature knows when to give up, David. Hello, friends. My name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z-O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends, to the 167th episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that enterprising young couple over there who don't seem like they have a care in the world about Backlook Cinema. They remind me of when I was young. I didn't have to worry about taxes or politics or trying to prevent World War III. To be young again. So I just want to go ahead and acknowledge this chaotic scheduling that I am currently enveloped in, trying to figure out when to record and when to release the shows. And I'm sorry to have to bring you along for this crazy ride, but I think that I'm going to figure it out hopefully sooner rather than later. Still trying to figure out how to deal with all of the what is it's a lot of uncertainty in the job schedule, because I'm not on a regular like 9 to 5 or even a regular schedule. I'm not working like specific hours. I'm just working at any time. It's almost like I'm on call, so it's kind of hard to schedule anything when you're on call. So I will straighten that out. I will figure it out. And then this podcast will come out on a regular schedule. In the opening credits, I'm going to announce that the movie that we're talking about is WarGames from 1983. So WarGames was, it's an interesting pick for me because I wasn't sure how it was going to translate today. It's, like I said, it came out a while back. It was a movie with a specific message that it wanted to tell. And I thought it'd be interesting because it has relevance to people having concern about AI today. This concern has been around for a long time. And this movie kind of highlighted that concern. It was one of the concerns that people had about either robots or artificial intelligence taking over for certain functions that maybe they shouldn't have. Maybe certain functions or certain jobs should be left up to human beings. And that's basically what WarGames is about. So a little bit more about WarGames. Now, I can't remember when I first saw this movie. I want to say that I probably saw it on HBO or something like that. Maybe I was watching it when I was still getting bootleg HBO, and it was like I think I've seen it like multiple times. I'm pretty sure that I didn't watch it on network television or in the movie theaters. I definitely didn't go to the movies to watch this, but I really was impressed by the young Matthew Broderick. I think we were about the same age, so it's just I'm just a kid watching another kid in high school go through his trials and tribulations, and there was probably a bunch of movies like that in the 1980s of basically teenagers going on these incredible adventures, and I think that's what I found attractive about it because maybe I thought that I could be in one of these adventures. I could be involved in trying to prevent World War III or something like that. I don't know. It's also I also found it to be a pretty good movie. But I don't have that like my memories of this movie are not that strong. So in rewatching it, it was like I remember the broad strokes but not the details. So rewatching it, it was like watching a brand new movie all over again. So let's talk about War Games. David Lightman isn't what one might call the brightest kid in school. In fact, he's barely passing some of his courses. On the other hand, he has a singular knack for understanding and using computers. With his setup at home, he's able to hack into a school system and change his report card grades. He hacks companies to steal their upcoming software. In one instance, he accidentally breaks into a highly restricted government computer. There are a number of games on this computer like chess, backgammon, or poker, but David wants to play a game called Global Thermonuclear War. The problem is that the computer, named Whopper, is actually connected to the US nuclear arsenal, and it doesn't understand the difference between fantasy and reality. So, this could be the last game that anyone ever plays. War Games was released June 3rd, 1983, produced by United Artists and Sherwood Productions. It grossed over $79 million in the US and Canada on a reported budget of $12 million. It made buckets of money. If we translated that to today's dollars, that would mean that it would have grossed $250 million if it were released a day, and the budget would have been $38 million. Just that's just magic. That's like the golden ratio of Hollywood, the golden ratio in Hollywood, where you invest a little bit of money to make a movie, and you make buckets and buckets of money on a release in theaters. So this movie did extremely well. This movie is starring Matthew Broderick. He plays David Lightman, and you may have seen him in The Producers or The Cable Guy or Godzilla from 1998. But most people know him from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And I'm not sure, was that the movie that made him a star? I think so, because I think that's the first time that I seen him. And he was super popular back in those days, right? He was in a lot of movies in the early 80s. Up next is Ali Sheedy as Jennifer Catherine Mack. And you may have seen her in Short Circuit, The Breakfast Club, St. Elmo's Fire, or Only the Lonely. She's another one that at a very young age in the early 80s had been in a lot of movies. It's it's like every other movie had Ali Sheedy in the cast. John Wood plays Dr. Stephen Falcon, also the voice of Joshua, also known as Whopper, or WOPR. WOPR stands for Whopper. And you may have seen him in Lady Hawk, Sabrina, or Chocolat. Up next is Dabney Coleman. You may have seen him, well, actually, he plays Dr. John McKittrick, and you may have seen him in 9 to 5, You've Got Mail, Tootsie, and, well, if you've been watching Yellowstone on television, you've seen him there too. I remember seeing Dabney Coleman on in a lot of movies when I was growing up. He was just there. It's like he had that recognizable face, uh, and just being like a ever present in the movies. Barry Corbin plays General Jack Behringer. You may have seen him in Solo from 1996, or Nothing in Common, or The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. Up next is Wannon Clay. She plays Pat Healy. You may have seen her in The Legend of the Lone Ranger from 1981, or Cheaper to Keep Her. Michael Ensign plays the General Behringer's aide. You may have also seen him in Ghostbusters or Titanic. And his role is small, like he's on the screen all the time, but it's a relatively small role and he doesn't say a whole lot. He doesn't really contribute that much to the plot. But the only reason that I'm including him in here is because he was very prominent in a Star Trek The Next Generation episode. So every time I see him, I think back to that episode. There's an episode where Riker he is undercover on a planet that is on the verge of developing warp technology, and the Federation is about to like extend a hand, friendship or whatever. But he's undercover disguised as one of these aliens, and he gets into an accident, and the aliens bring him into the hospital, and they discover that Riker is not one of them, and that he's wearing like prosthetics or whatever. And then there's like a chief security uh department head. He's I guess he would be like the Secretary of War or the Secretary of State, something like that, for that government, for that world. And that character was played by Michael Ensign. And I just remember him being kind of a dick. um, William Bogart plays Dr. Lightman. You may have seen him in Dog Day Afternoon or Perfect Murder. And Susan Davis plays Mrs. Lightman. And you may have seen her in The Glove or Pippi Longstocking. This movie was directed by John Badham, and I've covered him before. I forgot. His name just doesn't stick in the brain, if you know what I mean. It's like it's not something I remember. But uh, one of his movies that I covered was Short Circuit. That was back in 1980. I'm sorry, episode 82. And that was with John DiGregorio from Movie Lovers Unite. And that was another movie that I really like. That was it starred Gutenberg. So yeah, really, that was about artificial intelligence coming to life. So I guess John Badham has a theme. Also, he did Saturday Night Fever, Nick of Time, Point of No Return, The Hard Way, or you may have seen him, or you may have seen one of his movies called Bird on a Wire. This movie was written by Lawrence Lasker and Walter F. Parks. They are not really known as writers. They're basically producers. They produce more than they do, but two projects that they are prominent in besides this one was Sneakers and Project X. They co-wrote both of those movies. The music is by Arthur B. Rubinstein, and what's interesting about the score for this movie is that it's a combination of like computer music because it was like I guess he was using synthesizers to give you the feeling of the use of computers. I guess that would be David's theme because he's a computer head, or it could be the theme for the Whopper because it's a computer. So it's a lot of um, computer influence movements, and then he kind of blends it or he pairs it with like the kind of military drama music that you would expect to see in a movie about the military, about basic training, about the services, about honor and discipline, particularly U.S. military movies, with the drum beats and the marching band and that sort of thing. So he kind of blends these themes together in this movie. So it was an interesting piece of work. And you may have also heard his music in Stakeout, Lost in America, Blue Thunder, Nick of Time, and The Hard Way.
So that's it for the opening credits. What's interesting that it's harder than ever. I've been wanting to put these shops together. The backlookcinema.com/shop. That's actually up. There's stuff on the shop, and there's some merch that you can get there, and so that's fine. It's just the eBay shop that I've been trying to get up that I haven't been able to get up. And now it's harder than ever because I'm not home most of the time. But it's going to be such an exciting announcement when I finally put it together. And I can tell you, hey, now you can go there on eBay and see what I'm trying to get rid of. Yeah, but that's it. That's it for my announcements. And I want to go and talk about my favorite parts. All right. So War Games, it's a pretty straightforward movie. They had some very uh I guess obvious is the word, very obvious themes. They weren't beating around the bush. There are some movies where I have to kind of tease out what the theme of that movie might be. And sometimes I just watch a movie and kind of let it wash over me without looking for a message. I'm not looking for any kind of deeper message when I watch movies. If I catch a message, I'll catch it, but if I don't, that's also fine. But in this movie, the themes, the message, the lessons that you are meant to learn is super obvious, and it kind of breaks down to three things. Uh, the first is the dangers of artificial intelligence. One of the problems they had with the Whopper, also known as Joshua, is that it did not know the difference between reality and fantasy. It's connected to real nuclear weapons. So so when it plays a game, it's like, well, I guess I'm going to actually launch these weapons because we're actually at war with Russia. He doesn't understand that a game is supposed to be fantasy. So, or well, it has a male voice, and it was kind of named after a child. So, I think we're using the he programs for this computer. But anyway, he or it doesn't understand. So it's about to start World War III, and that's one of the dangers. Like maybe you shouldn't take it out of the hands of human beings. Maybe this is one of those tasks that should remain firmly in or under human control. And that's one of the things that we are grappling with in society right now. It's like it's come forward where AI is generating art, it's generating works of fiction, it's generating deep fakes, it's everything like all of our computers, our tablets, our phones, they're integrating AI into it. It's almost intrusively, it seems. It's like now it's got AI, and you're like, I didn't particularly ask for AI. I didn't order AI with my iPhone, but there it is. It's sitting there waiting for you to use it. I don't use it all that much. I've used it to generate some copy, but I feel like I can write some of this stuff, so I don't use it to for my copy or for my artwork. But there are some things that it's useful for, and I've used it for those purposes. But you got to realize that like when you use it to generate art, it's actually stealing art from that already exists. It's stealing copyrighted work to generate the art that you want on your project. Or when you use it to make copy or to write a story, it could be stealing from stories that are already written. That's the current concern with AI. We're not really concerned with it firing off nuclear weapons, but it could escalate to that seemingly. And I think it's fascinating how this movie from God, how long ago was that? 30, almost 40 years ago, is relevant to today. Another thing that it goes over is that it's the no-win scenario of nuclear war. So back in the 80s, we were very concerned about, you know, s- the possibility of World War III. That fear had slowly been dying down all the way from the 1950s, I think. Uh, back in the 1950s, the kids were doing drills where they would hide under their desk because a nuclear alarm would go off, and that they would have to hide under the desk because that was part of the drill. People were building underground bunkers on their property so that in case of war, they could move their family to these underground areas to basically wait out the nuclear winter that would follow. There was a real concern back in the 50s. And then, like, over time, that concern had slowly been like letting up. So people were less and less concerned about it, but it was still relevant in the 1980s. So in the 1980s, there were a fair amount of Cold War dramas, and this is one of those dramas. And the possibility of somebody accidentally setting off World War III and believing that there was a way to win a nuclear war. And in this movie, the idea is that there's no winning a nuclear war. That we shouldn't have these weapons. It shouldn't be an option. If there is a world war, if there's a nuclear war where everybody dies, that's one of the concerns of this movie. And then finally, hacking is bad. That hacking computers, that hacking is bad behavior, and you shouldn't do it. That's because all of this started because a kid wanted to steal a computer program from a computer company, and he accidentally hacked into a government computer and nearly set off World War III. And I think the message is, see, kids, you shouldn't hack. Now, this movie came out at a time where hacking was not only it was not illegal. It was very hard for most people to go on the internet anyway. The only people who were using the internet were the super nerds. Like the super nerds, you had to be a nerd to the nth level because you had to write your own programs sometimes. You had to have specialized equipment. Not everybody had the internet, so you were only talking to specific computers. There were only like a handful of computers that you were actually going to connect to. There was no like Internet Explorer or anything like that to help you get on the web. You were doing it on your own. So this was this movie kind of woke up people to the dangers of hacking. And it was like hardly anybody had any security protocols. So this is when computer companies started introducing some kind of security for your computer so somebody couldn't just go online and hack your computer. So this was a message, a third message from the computer. Hacking is bad. It wasn't illegal at the time, but soon after this movie was released, it was made illegal. So some of my favorite parts is that it had a tense beginning, and I really liked the beginning. So in the beginning of the movie, you had these guys. They're coming in from the cold. They go into what looks like a hotel, and it's not a hotel. It's a top secret base, and this base leads to one of America's many nuclear silos. And then they go. At first, it starts off routines. They, doing this. They're changing shift. These guys are taking over from the other guys that are already in the silo with the missiles, because the missiles are maintained for like 24 hours. There's always some dudes in there maintaining missiles, waiting for the orders to launch the missiles, essentially. And on this particular night, these guys get the orders. They get the code. They authenticate the code. They push all the buttons to get ready to launch this nuclear weapon. And then on the final button that they have to, or this key that they have to turn, there's like two keys, and they have to be turned simultaneously by both of these guys in order to launch this nuclear missile or this battery of nuclear missiles. One guy loses his nerve. It's like, because the first thing he does is like call a higher up in the chain of command to make sure that this is real. Now, this is not part of their routine. It's like when they get orders to launch these missiles, they're just supposed to launch the missiles. They're not supposed to try to intervene, or they're not supposed to try to call anybody to verify that the orders are real. The process of verifying these orders is the verification that the orders are real and that they have to launch the weapon. And so at first, the guy tries to get his partner to call higher up, and the partner tries to call, but there's no way of getting through. The phone lines have already been shut down. And so the only thing that left to do is to turn these keys and push the button and launch all of these missiles. And the guy basically chokes, right? He's actually the commander of the team. The commander chokes. He's he's stuck at turning the key. He doesn't want to turn the key, and then his subordinate pulls out his I guess it's a revolver and points it at his head. It's like, you need to turn the key, sir. You need to turn the key, and that's where that scene ends. It's very intense. It's very gritty, and it kind of shows you the intensity of having these nuclear, the job of maintaining and launching these nuclear missiles. So I enjoyed that scene. I'm a sucker for this type of scene where it's like they have this routine that they go through. They have a set of instructions that they're supposed to follow, and how, I don't know, the seriousness of which they take their work, I guess. And then one guy falters, and now you got to figure out what to do with this dude that doesn't want to go through with his orders. So that was a pretty cool scene. The movie starts off with a bang. um, I've been well, this kind of leads to the next scene where people are discussing maybe replacing these guys with a computer, replacing the guys like the the people in charge of launching the missiles, like the generals and the majors, and the higher up officers that make the decision to launch the weapon. That they still have command and control of that. But once they make the decision, they tell the computer, and the computer simply launches the missiles. It's like it's not going to hesitate. It's not going to second guess. It's not going to lose its nerve. It's not going to question the general's orders. It's not going to have any care about the millions of lives that will be lost when these missiles are launched. It's just going to launch the missiles after it gets the orders to do so. So that's what this lead scientist wants to do. And he's developed this computer. They call it the Whopper. You've heard me say the Whopper in reference to Whopper. Whopper actually stands for War Operations Plan Response, ROP or WOPR. It's just, it's cute, isn't it? So the so now the I think the general or the president's aide or somebody, they acquiesce, and they allow the Whopper to basically have the ability to launch these nuclear weapons. The movie cuts to Matthew Broderick playing David Lightman, and just, I forgot to look up how old he was when he made this movie, but he looks very young. I, I didn't get the feeling that it was like a 20-year-old playing a 17-year-old. He looks 17, but at the same time, Matthew Broderick just had that kind of face where he looked like he was a teenager well into his 30s. So he could have easily been like a 20-year-old playing a 17-year-old. I wouldn't put it past him, but he looks every bit of 17 in this movie, 17 or 18. Like, even if he was 19, I would give him a pass. But he looks so young in this movie. And the co-star Ali Sheedy, I think she was around the same age too, because she was in the Breakfast Club, and between her and one other actor, they were the only ones who were actually teenagers, and everybody else in the Breakfast Club was in their 20s, and some of them in their late 20s. But and she looked like she was a teenager. She looked like she belonged in high school. So that was impressive. And it kind of brought me back. We see David Lightman for the first time. He's playing Galaga at an arcade. And I'm like, oh my God, I remember that. I remember going to arcades. I had to break the rules to go to arcade. The arcade that I went to when I was growing up, it was across the street and from where I lived at. And I was never supposed to cross the street. First of all, I wasn't even supposed to leave my apartment complex. And then I certainly wasn't supposed to go several blocks to the street that one of the main streets in my neighborhood. And I certainly wasn't ever supposed to cross that street. But that's where the arcade was. That's where Pac-Man was. So I remember going there, going to the arcade, seeing all the games, and losing at all the games. I love video games, but I was never really good at any of those earlier games. And then I also remember 7-Eleven used to have at least one arcade machine in the store, and it was usually Pac-Man. And sometimes you would see a line outside 7-Eleven just waiting, kids waiting for their turn to play Pac-Man. So yeah, those were fun times. And seeing that scene of David Lightman playing a Galaga game, it just brought back memories of me going to the arcade. I talked about part of the story where, you know, he uses his computer and accidentally hacks into the Whopper. What's funny is that I feel like he's a kid. His family has some means. Like certainly it's a working class family, but I feel like they're upper middle class because I feel like he had to have taken he would have had to convince his parents like a lot to buy all of this computer equipment. Like it's one thing, like in order to get on the internet nowadays, you just need your computer and you could if you well you need your computer and some internet service like maybe you're an Xfinity customer or maybe you have a cell phone and you can use your cell phone service but you don't really need any special equipment like your computer has all of the equipment it needs inside so you you take your computer you open it up you find a Wi-Fi signal and you are on the internet and it's as simple as that like back in the early days, you needed a lot of special equipment. And David had all of this special equipment. He had this you couldn't just you couldn't just connect your phone line to a computer. It was so early that he actually had to put his phone receiver on this special device so that he can call and go out into the internet that way. And then he also had like a voice box so that when a strange computer, like whatever computer that he was hooked up to on the internet, when it responded to him, it responded in text on his screen, but he had a voice box that would translate that text to voice so that he could so it'd be like the computer was talking to him. And he had monitors, he had all of this other things. He had this advanced printer. He had a lot of equipment. His parents must really love him because they gave him some of the most expensive looking computer equipment that I've ever seen in a private home. And it did seem like they were wealthy. It just seems like they gave a large portion of their income to their son. So that was fascinating. So another one of my favorite parts is this is after they hack into the Whopper. And they're not really sure what the Whopper is. They only know that it's a strange computer. Like David wants to hack into this computer company because they have a new game coming out. He wants to hack into that company and steal their game, the program for that game, so he can play it at home without having to pay for it. And so he's randomly calling a bunch of different computers to find this computer company. And one of the numbers that he calls at random happens to lead to a computer that is in charge of all the nuclear weapons. But he doesn't really know that yet. He just thinks it's strange because normally when you call a computer, the computer identifies itself where it says the company, the name of the company that the computer belongs to or something like that. But when he calls the strange computer, it's just a blank screen. And initially he thinks because there are games listed on this computer, he thinks that it's the company that he's been trying to access. And it's not until later on that he realizes that it's a real government computer in charge of actual weapons. So when it's him and his girlfriend played by Ali Sheedy. Well, I keep calling her Ali Sheedy, but it's Ali Sheedy. And so it's not really his girlfriend. It's somebody that he wants to be his girlfriend. So it's basically him and Jennifer, his main prospective girlfriend. And and they've already hacked the Whopper and they're playing one of the games that they have like chess and checkers and all this stuff, kind of stuff that I mentioned earlier. But he wants to play thermonuclear war, and uh, he chooses the side of Russia, and Whopper chooses the side of the United States. And like he has Russia launch nuclear weapons and they take out Las Vegas, and they're like, what do and like Jennifer's like, what do we do? What target did we take out first? And David is just having the time of his life. It's like, let's take out this city. I don't care. And they're just chilling and drinking tab and eating sandwiches and just having a good old time with their nuclear war game. Meanwhile, over at NORAD, where the computer is situated, people are freaking the fuck out. They're losing their minds. They're like, oh my God, we got a nuclear attack because for David, it's just a game, but for the people at NORAD, they think that Russia is launching nuclear weapons. They can see this displays and the data is telling them that Russia is launching weapons. Like some of their sensors are not showing launches, but the computer is telling them that there are launches and that, that cities are being hit. And then there's this one intense moment where they see the missiles coming, and there's a computer scientist. He says it's a fake, it's a mirage. It's not actually happening. And so they have to call all their senators around the United States and says, we're being told that this is not real. So you need to hang on. Don't launch any missiles. Just hang on. And we just got to see if the computer scientist is telling us is correct. And so they're all nervous. They're waiting for the missiles to hit that are being launched from Russia. And the missiles hit. They take out the East Coast. So all of New York, Washington, D.C., they're all going to cities on the West Coast, Los Angeles, Nevada, Las Vegas. They're gone. It's like a white plume, and the cities are destroyed according to the computer. And then they call the cities, and the cities are like, yeah, we're fine. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. It's like the computer scientist says that it was just a mirage. It these strikes didn't actually happen. And they're all relieved. What happened was on the news, it gets reported on the news that there was a close call with nuclear weapons, that people thought that Russia had launched weapons, and it actually turned out to be a computer error. And so David sees this on the news. Jennifer sees this on the news that they that there was a close call or a false alarm for a nuclear strike, and they realize that they caused it. So when they realize that they could have caused or almost caused World War III, David starts to freak out a little bit, starts to unplug the computer. he he unplugs his computer from the internet, and then Whopper tries to call. Whopper tries to call David to try to continue the game, and David unplugs the connection. He doesn't want to talk to the Whopper anymore about playing any kind of game. Now he's scared. But the problem is the Whopper is still playing the game. He hasn't stopped playing the game. He has a countdown clock and everything. So basically, with them chilling in the room and having sandwiches while they cause NORAD to panic, that's one of my favorite parts. Another one of my favorite parts is well, it's not really a favorite part, it's more of an annoyance. So there's a point in time when David is acquired by the military, and he's brought to NORAD, and he's basically held which he's detained by the military. And so you got the lead scientist, Dr. John McKittrick, played by Dabney Coleman, trying to figure out what's going on with this kid, because they're trying to figure out if he's working with somebody else. Like, they can't believe that this 17-year-old is doing this on his own. He has to have help from an outside source, and they're thinking that he has help from a foreign agent, maybe most likely Russia. That's what they're thinking. And so they're holding him for questioning. And so my annoyance is that they have some military guards there, and some of these guards are wearing berets. Now, it doesn't make any sense why some of these guards will wear berets and some of them don't. It doesn't. Also, it doesn't make sense. I meant to look this up, but one of the military protocols is that when you're in the military, you wear hats. You wear your hats outside. In the military, they call them covers. You wear your cover outside. When you go inside, you take off your cover. You remove your covers. So if you are in the military, you are not supposed to be wearing your cover indoors. But in a lot of movies, I see guards wearing their covers. And I meant to look up whether or not guards are supposed to be wearing their covers, because I don't remember guards wearing covers when I was in the military. But that's not what bothered me. What really bothered me was I mentioned the beret. So the guard is wearing the beret and it looks so bad. Like it's like the worst way. Because here's the thing. When you look at Google it. So do you understand what I'm talking about? If you look at a U.S. soldier, they wear their beret in a particular way. There was a time when I was in the military, they had all the soldiers was going to wear a beret in the army, not the all the military, but in the U.S. Army in particular. And the army, it used to be that only the special forces wore berets. So you have, for example, the Green Berets, they wore berets, and I think there's a Delta Force or whatever kind of special forces that the army had, they were distinguished by a beret. And somebody in the army decided, I like the beret. I want all the soldiers to wear beret. So when I was in the army, I was there for that change where all the soldiers wore beret, and they look cool. I was like, oh man, I couldn't wait to get my beret. Because I thought there was one of the coolest things that you could wear. But then I quickly found out that it's not the most desirable piece of headwear because they were hot, they were itchy, and the beret had to be shaped in a particular type of way. And getting that shape was difficult. But when you got that shape, that's why I want you to Google it, because when you look at the U.S. Army beret, that's the shape that it's supposed to have. But the uh the guy, the guy, the guy in the movie, his beret wasn't shaped that way. It was abhorrent. It was offensive. It was it was wrong, and I don't know how they were allowed to look like that. Why would you put somebody in the movie? There have been movies with people wearing army berets before. There've been other movies. Why didn't the producers or the director or the people in the art department or the costume department look at those movies and make sure that the beret was worn correctly? Why did this guy have such an ate up looking beret? I don't understand. Um, Obviously, when I originally watched this movie as a child, I didn't know. So because they knew that I wouldn't know or care, they didn't know and they didn't care. So I hated that guard because he was sexually harassing people, and he had a messed up beret. And because he was trying to sexually harass a woman, uh, David, who is actually a genius not only in computers but in computer systems, was able to escape. He was able to MacGyver his way out of a holding cell using like everyday objects. He had a spoon, some gum. I don't know what he used, but he was able to take apart a control panel for the door from the room that he was locked in, and he MacGyvered his way out and escaped off the base. And one of the ways he was able to escape off the base was that there was a tour group there. And after sneaking around, he saw a tour group. He just blended in with the tour group and driven away. And then later on, he MacGyvered a payphone to work. Back in the day, we used to have payphones, and he was able to MacGyver a free call using a piece of trash on the ground. I don't know if you could actually do that with a payphone, but that's how he did it. The next thing I want to talk about is Faulkner's speech. So Faulkner was the engineer that built the Whopper, and he's had some he's had an interesting life. And one of the things that David wanted to do to break into this computer before he knew it was a government computer was he needed to learn about the guy who designed it. Or maybe he did know it was a government computer. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He wanted to know. He wanted to break in, and so he started to do his research on Faulkner. Is getting into his past, looking at his families, like doing everything, and then he learned that Faulkner had a child, and his child's name Joshua. Joshua got a disease and passed away, and so it was around the time when Joshua passed away that Faulkner uh, was working on this computer project, and then later on he had passed away. And then later on in the movie, you find out that Faulkner had not passed away, that he was actually alive. It was due to the ingenuity and genius of David that he kind of figured out that Faulkner is probably still alive. But this is all due to the computer, the Whopper, kind of telling him about this alternate address that Dr. Faulkner had. So David follows up on this address and goes to this island. I forgot which state that they're in. But wherever it was they needed a ferry to get to this small island where he was staying at, and it turns out he was alive. Everybody's surprised. It's him and Jennifer, and that's where Faulkner gives the speech. That it was a speech that I gave at the beginning of the show about how nature just gives up. Now, the thing is, I think Dr. Faulkner gets a lot of that wrong. It's not that nature gave up; it's that nature well, not nature, an outer space visitor came and smacked the earth, and also there were a bunch of volcanoes that went off. So it's not so much that nature gave up, it was a catastrophe. But he took this to mean, and I think the death of his son kind of affected him, where perhaps it put him in a deep depression and it made him really pessimistic, and he was also working on a nuclear weapon system. I think all of that tied into just believe that it doesn't really matter. Humanity will destroy itself and the earth will start all over again. So when David goes to Dr. Faulkner for Faulkner's help, Faulkner gives a speech about nature giving up. And I think he's really talking about himself. He's talking about that he's given up. Like he realizes that the situation is dangerous, that the computer might launch a nuclear weapon at, well, dozens and dozens of nuclear weapons at Russia, which will cause Russia to respond, and they will send their nuclear response and probably wipe out most life on North America and Eurasia, because other countries with their nuclear arsenal, they'll also start attacking or whatever. So Faulkner just feels like it's time to give up. Like he lost his son. He's a little bit despondent or whatever. And David does not want to give up. He tries to convince Faulkner. But that speech basically showing where his head at, where his state of mind at, I really enjoyed that. So I thought that was really powerful. So my last favorite part, that will have to do with basically the ending of the, well, not the ending of the movie, that what do you call it, the climax of the movie. So one of the things that led up to the climax, it started off with like there was a black woman, she's a soldier, she's giving at NORAD, she's giving a countdown to when all of these missiles are going to be launched or whatever. And I think there's something poetic about a black woman giving a countdown to the end of the world. I don't know what that message is. I don't know what message I'm taking from it, but there's something poetic about it. And this kind of lead me to, to think about the Whopper, because basically what happened is that the people at NORAD theoretically have control of the Whopper. The lead scientist, Dr. McKintrick, you would think that he would have control of the Whopper, but the Whopper has decided that he needs to play this game. So the Whopper, also known as Joshua, has locked everybody out of the computer system. He's froze the system so that only the computer has control of it, and they can't shut it down. They can't like cause like a power outage or anything to the Whopper, because if you cause a power outage to the computer will take that as being that Nora has been destroyed. So it's just going to launch all the missiles anyway. So there's really nothing they can do there. And so this woman is doing the countdown to the Whopper launching the entire nuclear arsenal. That was interesting. And I feel like the Whopper is kind of like what people are saying about P. Diddy right now, or what they said about P. Diddy, and that he be wanting to party, but you got to tell him no. The Whopper be wanting to party, but you got to tell him no. And the climax of the movie is that, you know, it's really there's a daring race to get back to NORAD. What happens is that even though Faulkner initially decides he doesn't want to help, he changes his mind. He calls NORAD. They send a helicopter, and he finds David and Jennifer and tells them that it's okay. He's going to take them to NORAD with him, because after Faulkner decides that he doesn't want to help, he goes upstairs. He says, "I'm going to bed. Y'all can stay here if you want to." We're only a couple miles away from the nuclear center. Like if the nuclear target, so if that gets hit by a nuclear weapon, then they'll be vaporized since they're so close to the target. So he's just going to sleep off the apocalypse. And so David is upset. So he leaves and starts wandering around the island trying to figure out how to get off the island. The ferry's already left. They're looking for a boat. Maybe they could take a rowboat to the mainland, but they can't find a boat. And Jennifer was like, "Let's swim. We could swim there." And because Jennifer is down to clown. Jennifer is very athletic. She's down to do anything. And she's like, "Oh, it's only a couple of miles. We can do it." I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, I would not want to swim a couple of miles. But David doesn't know how to swim, and so they don't swim. And this is at this time, and so that's when the helicopter comes. And with Dr. Faulkner on it, they get into a helicopter to go to NORAD, and it's just like race to get to the NORAD. They get into a jeep, and they're about to close up NORAD. They're about to shut it all down because they don't know if they're going to get into a nuclear war with Russia. They get into a jeep. The jeep crashes into the gate. They run into these heavy doors. They're about to close. They're running down the hallways. They're running into like the center, the command center that's about to close. Their heavy doors. It's like a vault. It's like 3 foot steel thick door that's about to close, and they get in just in time. And so now they gotta find a way to talk to the Whopper and tell it to stop with the nuclear war shenanigans. And they're trying to they're thinking of all kinds of scenarios or something that they can do. And finally, and like they go to the gaming selection to try to get the Whopper to play another game, but it doesn't want to play another game. It just wants to play the nuclear war. It says that it has to finish the nuclear war before it can play another game. But they realize, or at least David has this intuition, that there's a game that they could play with the Whopper that's not listed, and that's tic tac toe. So they go and they convince Whopper to play tic tac toe, and then they get Whopper to play tic tac toe by itself. And so the objective is for the Whopper to win tic tac toe, even though he's playing both sides. And the thing is, he's playing hundreds and dozens and thousands of tic-tac-toe games. They can see the display of the tic-tac-toe on a giant screen, and it's just a blur of X's and O's. And it tries so hard that it basically crashes, or at least it crashes NORAD or something. There's a puff of smoke, light flashes, the lights go out. He's trying to win at tic-tac-toe, but he can't. He keeps coming to a draw. So he does the same thing with nuclear scenarios. He goes through hundreds of nuclear scenarios of Russia and the United States launching nuclear missiles at each other. And after all of these hundreds and hundreds of scenarios that are going by in a blur, Whopper comes to the conclusion that no matter what it does, both Russia and the United States will be destroyed. There will be no winner in a nuclear war. And it comes to the conclusion that the best way to win the game is not to play, because Whopper just wants to win. It's programmed to win, and it can't win. So it would rather not play the game than to try to win it, because it can't win. It'll be a draw every single time. And then it says, "How about we play some chess?" Because that's what Whopper wanted to play in the first place. This all would have been avoided if you had just played chess, which is the game that Whopper wanted to play in the first place. So that's how that turned out. So when a computer asks you, "Would you like to play a nice game of chess?" I think the correct answer is yes. Let's play some chess. So those are my favorite part. I think those are five. And now let's get into the next part. Let's talk about trivia. So this would be the top 10 trivia that I was able to grasp from IMDb. The first thing I have is that the studio had the Galaxian from 1979 and the Galaga from 1981 arcade machines delivered to Matthew Broderick's home, and he practiced for 2 months to prepare for the arcade. That must have been awesome. I wonder if he asked for these machines or the studio just took initiative, but that's pretty awesome that they basically delivered two of the most popular video game machines to his house so that he can practice. So for a scene that was only on screen for maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes, and you don't actually really see him playing the game, you see him at the machine, and then you see hands moving and controlling the characters or the action figures on the game, but you don't really, it's kind of hard to get a wide shot of him actually playing the game. So didn't really seem all that necessary to do that. They could have just had like a stand-in come in and play the games uh, for that scene or whatever. But still, that's pretty awesome. I love those games, and I was terrible at both of them. According to John Badham, the Jeep trying to crash through the gate at NORAD and turning over was an actual accident. The Jeep was supposed to continue through the gate. They added the scene of the characters running from the Jeep and down the tunnel and used the botch jump Jeep stunt. So yeah, that was because actually when I was watching this and when the Jeep turned over, I'm like, that don't usually happen. Usually in Hollywood, when a vehicle crashes through the gate, it just continues on because according to Hollywood, all vehicles are super vehicles, and this Jeep had crashed through the gate and turned over, and I'm like, whoa, that's unusual. They don't usually do that in Hollywood. And the guys had to get out of the Jeep and run over to the NORAD, and and as it turns out, that wasn't supposed to happen. So wow, I guess that took some initiative. The NORAD command center built for the movie cost $1 million, making it the most expensive set ever constructed at the time. The producers were not allowed to use the actual NORAD command center, obviously, so they had to imagine what it was like. In the DVD commentary, director John Badham notes that the actual NORAD command center isn't nearly as elaborate as the one in the movie, calling the set NORAD's wet dream of itself. And that's probably true. There's a lot of stuff in the military that's actually kind of mundane. The movie includes the first cinematic reference to a firewall, a security measure used in computer networking and internet security. So yeah, because computer security was brand new at this time. The WOPR or Whopper, as seen in the movie, was made of wood and painted with a metal finish paint. As the crew filmed the displays of the Whopper, special effects supervisor Michael L. Fink sat inside and entered information into an Apple II computer that drove the countdown display. The computer named Whopper was a joke based on Burger, the real computer NORAD once used to predict war strategies. So that's funny. Your computer, and Burger is BRGR. So your computer has Burger, well, we're going to have the Whopper. Hacking wasn't actually illegal when this movie came out. That didn't happen until the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984 and further expansion of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986. The release of this film resulted in a substantial spike in interest in computer hacking and a commensurate increase in actual penetration of computer systems. As a result, the industry was forced to make several seemingly obvious changes like creating accounts with default rather than no password on newly installed systems. This is because prior to the film's release, it was just assumed most computer systems would only be accessed by authorized persons, and the odds of someone breaking in was felt to be vanishingly low, except for high value systems such as banks or the military. But as you may know, you may have some personal experience of somebody hacking your joint. So, a password is key. Speaking of which, I'm pretty sure that everybody listening to the sound of my voice has a computer in their pocket that we lovingly call a phone. And the phone is definitely password protected or fingerprint protected or face lock protected. He's like, you got some, nobody can just get into your phone. There's going to have to be some trickery involved. And sometimes you get locked out of your phone and that could be a pain. So yeah, we take our security and privacy very seriously. There were several nuclear launch close calls that influenced the writers Laskers and Parks that created the scenario of war games, including an incident at NORAD on November 9th, 1979, when information on the training simulation tape concerning Soviet sub launches was accidentally fed into the warning system, and for 6 minutes, the American military complex went on high alert. Only after no Soviet missiles were detected by the PAVE early warning radar system did the U.S. stand down. Training simulations were accordingly moved off-site of NORAD after this incident. In the movie, one of the scenarios fed to NORAD operators by Joshua is an influx of encroaching Soviet missile subs. And by Joshua, I mean Whopper. This movie inspired Congress to create the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. Representative Dan Glickman, Democrat, Kansas, opened the proceedings by saying, we're going to show about 4 minutes from the movie War Games, which outlines the problems fairly clearly. The House committee reportedly said War Games showed realistic computer representation of the automatic dialing and access capabilities of the personal computer. At last, we have this one. David Lightman was inspired by real-life hacker David Scott Lewis, who isn't allowed to discuss whether he ever hacked into a military computer. This dude, David Scott Lewis, has the original NDA. So that's it for the trivia. And now we're going to talk about what the critics thought. So the critics has this movie at a 94%. Audience has it at 76% on Rotten Tomatoes. And the IMDb has it at 7.1 out of 10. Mark Pfeiffer from Real Time Reflections on Cinema wrote, as a Cold War message movie and cinematic descendant of failsafe, War Games examines the inherent danger of flavoring technology's cool logic and situational calculations. So yeah, it felt pretty realistic, at least especially when I was watching it growing up. David Stewart from the Christian Science Monitor wrote, it's far too simplistic for comfort and downright dangerous if it makes anyone think today's self-destructive forces will bow jovially out of sight as soon as we grown-ups loosen up a little. I mean, that sort of happened when Congress watched the movie and decided to write some laws based on what they saw in the movie, and they do that. They do that often, like whenever there's a violent video game. At least back in the day, there's a violent video game, and they want to write some laws, or or there's a naughty scene in a movie, and they want to write some laws. And I wish that they would write some laws. And in a way, he's right because at the same time, you have these deadly school shootings, and they don't want to write any laws, or they'll write laws that allow even more guns in the school, or something like that. So he's both is so a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. James Berardenelli from Real Reviews wrote, to me, the most enjoyable aspect of war games is when David is at work on his computer system. There's something wonderfully nostalgic about watching a guy play with such antiquated machinery and recognize it was once considered state of the art. Yeah, that was kind of fun. I'd never seen a computer system like that in somebody's house, and yeah, it was definitely an advanced system for most people, and just seeing dudes tinkering with computers like that, I think that it was kind of nostalgic for me too. And then we have Vincent Cabney from New York Times. He wrote, like a computer game once played tends to disappear from one's memory bank as soon as it's finished. Now, I can understand why he wrote that in there like that because, the start of the movie was based on uh, a guy who's obsessed with video games and then playing, wanting a video game and this, that, or the other. I get why he wrote this, but this is absolutely asinine. This is somebody who has never played a video game and doesn't understand video games. Nobody forgets like they might forget a bad game, but video games is not something that you forget like that. Maybe if the video game was bad and you want to forget it, but I remember playing Tetris to the point where I am dreaming about Tetris. I'm dreaming about the tetraninos or whatever you call those things coming from the top of the screen and coming down to the ground and me trying to figure out how to beat this game in my dreams or such awesome game. Like people are still talking about The Last of Us and The Last of Us 2. People are still playing Street Fighter. They remember, I mean, of course they're playing Street Fighter 5, but they remember playing Street Fighter 2, being at the arcades and those memories of being the best at that game. Or like my memories of playing, I remember when I first saw Mortal Kombat, the cabinet, and was blown away by what I saw. When you have a good game, you don't forget good games. And this is a good movie. And when you see it, you're not going to forget this movie. So disagree with Vincent, and maybe he should stay in his lane with what he's talking about. Finally, War Games is, as of this recording, available on Max. That's it for today. Next week, I will continue with my childhood trek. And you may be asking if a new episode will actually come out next week. And the truth is, I really don't know. I have an irregular work schedule. Talked about it earlier. So I'm really trying to figure out how the schedule is going to work out and everything. But it's my intent to have it out next Monday. And on that show, we'll cover one of my all-time favorite classics, when I was a wee tyke, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok while it's still there, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. I'm not posting as much on Twitter now. Most of my posts are on Blue Sky, and usually I'm just responding to other people. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlickcinema.com. If you got a better name for this email address, I'd like to hear your suggestions. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlick Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from your studio with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.